I have a great guest that I'm excited to introduce you guys to. Erika Sanzi is a longtime educate advocate who has taught in all kinds of schools and also served on elected school committees. Her newsletter is at sanzi.substack.com, and it's free to subscribe. Erika, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Grace. Thanks for having me.
So, Erika, the first thing I want to do for my audience is just remind them before we get into your story that I loved, by the way. It's titled Parent Shaming is Nothing New. But I want to give everyone a refresher on what kind of sparked this story for you. There was a scandal of sorts out of Oakley. And what happened in Oakley, California was an entire school board was having a Zoom meeting and it went viral. And they did not know that they were live and they were streaming to parents, and they were belittling the parents in this Zoom meeting. And the one that stuck out to me the most, Erika, I'm going to play for everyone, was the Oakley School Board President, Lisa Brenzendine. This is cut 35.
And they don't know what we do behind the scenes. And it's really unfortunate that they want to pick on us because they want their babysitters back.
Right.
That's how I feel.
So, Erika, the first thing you point out when you talk about that is that this is not the first time this has happened. You give a lot of examples of this kind of shaming that parents are dealing with right now from teachers or board committee members or teachers unions.
Right. So this is nothing new. When people were talking about how shocked they were by the video, I had to say that I wasn't shocked at all. Not because I think most school board members behave that way, but because, every child in America has to go to school under the law, and there's so many people on these boards that this kind of thing does happen. And what they were saying was so offensive because, number one, they were essentially speaking about all parents with a broad brush as if everybody fits into these categories, and they were really insulting parents. And I think that that's what is happening now with the reopening conversation. And there hasn't really ever been another time that I can think of where there was so much blatant vitriol and insults being publicly thrown at parents because of one simple thing. They just want their kids to be able to go to school.
Yeah, and when you wrote this piece, you have all of these examples and screenshots and threads of parents who sent you, things that had happened between them and teachers. And you make it very clear as an educator that you don't think all teachers act like this or all teachers unions act like this. But there are some incredible ones, people being called nanny killers or being automatically associated with Donald Trump because they want their kids to go back to school. And the one I found the craziest was teachers blaming white privilege for the reason that parents want their kids to go back to school.
Yeah, so that's, by the way, I should clarify, I don't work in schools anymore. So I spent about a decade working in schools, but I'm not a current educator. I'm a former educator. And also I was in two unions, which I do think is relevant because I am criticizing them in large part because of things I saw, personally and firsthand. This narrative about it only being white, rich parents who want their children to return has been really inflammatory. Number one, it's not true. But number two, I don't know how adding a racial wedge to this conversation moves the needle forward for anyone. Now, it is true, listeners should know that in all of the polling, white parents are more likely to say that they're comfortable sending their kids back to school. But that doesn't mean that there aren't any non-white parents who want to. So tons of families of all backgrounds, for all different reasons, support the schools reopening. And to start smearing people and then trying to put them into these identity boxes instead of have the actual conversation, to me is not the way to go. And it's another form of shame, right? Because if I can accuse you of being a white supremacist, then a lot of other people are going to be scared to speak out because they don't want to be called that.
Right. And I've noticed that people are fearful of being seen as, callous or evil if they want to speak out and say, listen, it's time for these kids to go back to school. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, Erika, which I have noticed a little bit, is that these unions have a lot of power over the politicians. And when asked, Jen Psaki, who's Biden's press secretary, was asked, listen, if the unions get these massive COVID relief bundles of money, if they get billions of dollars to open up the schools, is it going to be a requirement that to get that money, the schools have to open? And she said no. So I'm really trying to understand, because I'm not a teacher, I never have been, but I'm trying to understand this mindset. And it's hard for me to hear this and not just think to myself, they just don't want to go back, period. Because if you get what you asked for, why wouldn't you let these kids come back to school?
Well, there's a couple things about your question that are important to know. First of all, the money that's already been allocated to schools, so, forget about this new big rescue plan, but the money that already has been allocated to schools, much of it is still sitting unspent. I believe there's $64 billion sitting unspent.
Wow.
So, and the rescue plan, which I think is $128 billion, if you look at the way that they've allocated the money for schools, they're trying to make us think that they need that money for reopening, but only 6% is targeted at 2021. So almost none of that money, if it passes, is going to be spent or given to the schools in 2021. In fact, I believe some of the spending happens as far out as 2028, although I'd have to double check that. So again, nobody should believe any of this talk about needing the money to reopen, because schools are sitting closed with $64 billion still sitting in the coffers unspent, and most of the money in the stimulus package, I'm not sure if that's what it's called, rescue plan, whatever they're calling it, is not going to be spent with any urgency at all.
Yeah.
To your larger point, though, yes, the reality is, and again, it's important to make a distinction between unions and the rank-and-file teachers. Most rank-and-file teachers, I suspect, don't know any of these details. And many of them have been very upset with the positions taken by their unions. But in general, the unions will always say they need more money. It is often because what they really want is more members that will pay dues to their organization, right? So if we can reduce class size, well, we need more teachers. Well, if we need more people to help us with COVID mitigation and protocols, well, we need to hire more people. So people should be very skeptical about these demands for more money and be asking, okay, well then where is it going to be spent and how does it tie to the conversation about reopening? Because let's remember, since October, over 60% of students in the United States have been back in school in person since October. Those schools opened without any massive stimulus package.
Right. And they figured out a way to do it. I'm talking to Erika Sanzi. You can follow her at ESANZI on Twitter. She has a great piece out. It's called Parent Shaming is Nothing New. And she posts a lot of them on Twitter. I like to read them because I don't have a background in this, and I'm trying to understand the mindset. And another question I had for you, Erika, and first I'm going to play this cut. This is from a teachers union rally in Maryland. And then I want to talk about it. Let's play the first sound cut.
So we say to our employer, to our county leaders, we MCPS employees are not the giving tree. We will not put ourselves at unnecessary risk. We will not sacrifice our health and safety. We will not take on so many duties that go beyond our role as educators and beyond a reasonable workload. And we are insulted that it was assumed, perhaps because we are overwhelmingly female, that we should just suck it up and obey.
Now,
delusional.
Let's stop it there. Erika, what I want to ask is, there seems to be this narrative that comes out of the teachers' unions that they are not going to risk their lives and they're not going to put themselves in harm's way. And I can't understand it because I see grocery store workers and trashmen and people who work in the private sector and people who work in public housing, and everyone seems to be going in and everyone seems to be dealing with it. So where is this mindset that like we're trying to kill them if we want them to go back to school?
I think part of the problem is that the leaders of the national teachers unions really spent a lot of time last year scaring their members and talking in ways like, that they were going to die if they went into the classroom. They had all kinds of rallies that involved, these like they carried fake tombstones with them.
Yeah.
But the more that we've learned, the more that we know that it is safe for them to go back into school. And particularly like student to teacher transmission is very, very rare. And if masks are worn, we are now learning one of the safest places you can be. They see less spread in schools than they do outside of school. So for example, if students are in school and they're doing the mitigation protocols like the distancing and the masks, they see less spread in schools than they do out in the community. So at this point, I have to say they're really wading into almost like science denialism. And it's interesting, right? Because everybody always loves to say, but it's science.
Right.
But they then don't like they don't like the science if it doesn't tell them what they want. So at the moment, the people that are not on the side of science are the people that are clamoring for schools to stay closed. And again, because, we would know if there had been big outbreaks in all of these states where schools are open, we would have heard about it. In fact, people have been dying to turn the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, into like the world's biggest villain. But they haven't been able to because this opening of schools has been successful. And and if you also look, the places where schools are not open tend to be either cities where the unions are extremely powerful, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, which is barely open, or very, very progressive. So like Fairfax, Virginia and Alexandria, Virginia, they're not super, union heavy, but they're very progressive. And the school boards there have been unwilling to open the schools. So again, the other thing is it's really all blue cities where children are not able to go to school. And by the way, I'm not saying every kid has to go to school. Parents should have the ability to keep their children home for remote learning if that's what they prefer and that's what makes them more comfortable. But all kids need an option,
right,
to go to in-person school.
Erika, I got to hold you there. I do appreciate the interview. Sanzi.substack.com. That's SANZI. Awesome stuff. We hope to have you on again soon. Thank you so much for joining the show. I appreciate learning it from, she's a former educator, but she has more, knowledge about it than I do. And I like to try to understand this mindset because to a lot of us, it just seems crazy at this point. Guys, who says there's no such thing as a free lunch? Not me. That's because with my friends at Aviva Trattoria, we'll be giving away a free lunch every other Friday here at the studio. We've got 2 lucky listeners coming in this week, and we're so excited. We're going to load up with pizza and arancini and salads and chicken parm sandwiches and their famous homemade chips. You guys got to check them out. They have 4 locations in Marlborough, Maynard, Rentham, and Westford. And today's Wednesday. It's 2 Slice Wednesday. 2 slices of cheese or pepperoni pizza and a Peroni for only $8.95. That's a great deal. From seafood to their homemade pasta, Aviva has you covered. Make sure you check them out. Takeout is available too. If you want to sign up to win the free lunch, go to gracecurleyshow.com. Enter your email. That's gracecurleyshow.com. You could be the winner of the Aviva Trattoria free lunch in studio experience. So check that out. I'll be back on the other side with your calls, 844-500-4242. This is the Grace Curley Show.
Follow Grace on Twitter at @G_Curley.